Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Unbelievers. I'm Cams, the Unbeliever, and I'm joined by my co-host...
Barge, also an unbeliever, still unbelieving.
So let's talk about another unbeliever, Thomas Covenant. So this is chapter 11 from Lord Fowl's Bane by Stephen R. Donaldson. Chapter 11 is titled The Unhomed.
Right. It's an interesting one.
It is indeed. It introduces my favourite character in the whole series of books. But we'll get to that. Stick around and you'll hear who that is. So we left after the celebration of spring, the wraiths and Andalane, which didn't quite go as it normally does.
Yeah, the festival was totally desecrated and attacked, and the wraiths were eaten by this cloud of beings.
The Urviles, the wedge of darkness.
Yeah, so they flee.
So they flee, but they get rescued by an unfettered one who comes in at the last minute. And it seems as though he rescues the wraiths, the unfettered one, and then dies as he rescues the wraiths and gives Covenant and Atiaran the space to flee, which they do, leaving all the stuff behind except for the staff of Baradakis.
And he says, as he tells them to flee, that their mission is important, and so he seems to kind of be giving himself up for that, so to speak. Yeah,
so when we had our last episode, we talked briefly about the unfettered one and what that was, because it had been referred to in an earlier chapter. But we get a bit of a longer explanation of the unfettered ones in chapter 11, so we'll get to that as we go through the chapter.
Right, so she's feeling guilty and they go to sleep, and then the next morning.
Yeah, so I found the opening paragraph of chapter 11 to be particularly well written. Just the sense of the mood and the scenery around them. It's palpable, the way that this is written.
There's certainly a sense of depression and an acute awareness of the immensity of the damage that has been done at so many levels.
Yeah. So they continue on their quest, but their hearts are broken, it seems. They're just going through the motions. Yeah, but slowly, the goodness of Andalane starts to refresh them a little bit. But Covenant's reminded of the prophecy and what the despiser said to him, because he's considered as Beric Halfhand reborn, but he was powerless to save the wraiths. And he's reminded of what the despiser said to him. You have might, you will never know what it is. So although he has the wild magic, he wasn't able to use it to save the wraiths. And the wraiths recognised it, they paid homage to it.
That's right, they settled on the ring.
Yeah. So after a time, he said, without meaning to speak aloud, I would have saved them if I could. And then the Atiaran replies, you have the power. What power? He asked painfully. So she replies, do you wear the white gold for nothing? And he says, it's just a ring. I wear it because I'm a leper. So we've been through this before, but Atiaran is obviously, she can't understand how someone with such power could be unaware of his own capabilities or unable to use the power. And the devastation of what happened is just eating her up.
And although we've been through this before, I mean a few times actually, with this whole kind of, it's kind of slightly different for TC this time it seems, because, I mean, he's really moved by the whole devastation. And he's very much a part of it. He's no longer separate in a sense, right? And so he's almost kind of, I don't know, toying a lot closer with that idea. Because, I mean, if there's a savior, there's Beric Halfhand, and that's few things are pointing it towards him, and so even his resistance doesn't seem to be. It seems a lot weaker. He says, "I'm no Beric, no hero. I'm too sick for that." But he lacked the strength.
Yeah. I think he's maybe getting used to the land a bit, so it's, I don't know.
I mean, but again, just after that, he goes on to the other side, the two worlds, and he comes back to the whole thing about him dreaming.
Yeah, I've underlined that section. He says the dream wanted him to be a hero, a saviour, therefore it seduced him, swept him along, urging him forward so that he would run, heedless of himself, to risk his life for the sake of the wraiths, the land, illusion. The only difference in this between Atiaran and Lord Fowl was that the despiser wanted him to fail. And then it repeats the quotation, "You will never know what it is." Of course he would never know. He was dreaming. That was the answer to everything. He knew the difference between reality and dream. He was sane. He was a leper. As before, when we've had this kind of inner monologue, it's been about madness and insanity. So here he's countering that by acknowledging that it's a dream. He's sane. He's a leper.
Yeah, I don't know how much there might be of him trying to convince himself. Because, after all, it's still something to cling to. And he's kind of clinging, in a way.
The fact that it's a dream, an illusion.
Well, I mean, is it a fact that it's a dream?
Well, that's what he's telling himself.
But then that's what I mean. He's kind of telling himself to try and convince himself. I mean, he doesn't seem so convinced. Certainly not as much as he was before.
Yeah, so you're saying that there's some doubt creeping in?
Or maybe softness, I don't know. He's not maybe as perturbed about the whole thing of, being in between two worlds, but perhaps that'll come again.
Yes, it will, because he has a dream within the dream later on, which we'll get to.
Yeah. So here, also another interesting thing, when he kind of does his VSE, his body appears whole and he can see no injuries.
Yeah.
So he's still, and of course earlier on, the land, the healing kind of aspect of the land lifts his mood somewhat. But, here he still seems to be kind of getting stronger anyway, physically.
Yeah, and it seems that the goodness of Andalane is lifting Covenant more than it's lifting Atiaran. She's the one who has the darker mood and seems to have been affected more by what's happened in Andalane than he, although that's not surprising because she knows the gravity of it, whereas he doesn't, because she's native to the land.
Right, and I mean, that's true, and later on when things kind of get even worse, it's Thomas Covenant that kind of pushes forward, so.
Yeah, there's one day where he leads the march, whereas up until then he'd been watching her back as she led them through.
Yeah, and she seems to be giving up hope.
Yeah, she senses that they've already failed in their mission, and yet she continues.
Right, and then she tells him about the unfettered one.
Yeah, we get another explanation here about some of the history of the land and about who the unfettered ones are. So they're the ones who go through a certain ritual when they reach a stage at the Lore's Rat, where they go off to be on their own.
They have some private vision which compels them to seek it in isolation. I mean, brilliant.
Yeah. So they're going deep into their areas of passion or lore, and we get some of the ritual here, the rites of unfettering, which is a hymn that they sing.
Right, so they seem almost kind of like mystics, huh?
Yes. Some are said to know the secrets of dreams, others to practice deep mysteries in the arts of healing, still others to be the friends of the animals, speaking their language and calling on their help in times of great need.
That's exactly the bit I was looking for, yes.
Yeah, so I've actually written here Radagast, which is a character from Lord of the Rings. It's a little bit like the wizards in Lord of the Rings, the unfettered ones.
Also, yeah, very knowledgeable, because when she describes the unfettered one who saved them, he knew more of the 7 words than my ears have ever heard.
Yeah, so that's what he calls out. So you remember that Atiaran is wont to say Melancurion Abatha.
Right.
So those are the 2 words that she knows, but when the unfettered one comes to save them, he calls out Melancurion Abatha and then carries on with more words that she's never heard before.
Oh, I see. So that's what she's referring to. I had wondered what the 7 words were. Okay, I see.
Binas Mil, Banas Nimoram Kabal, Melancurion Abatha, Abatha Nimoram. I hope I haven't just called something down in reciting those words.
She also says something interesting. No evil has ever before been aimed at the wraiths of Andalen.
Mm-hmm.
The Grey Slayer himself never dared.
Yes, I've underlined that because it makes me think, well, who's behind this?
Right.
If it's the Grey Slayer, then why now? If it's not, then who? Yeah, we discussed it before. Lord Fowl obviously knows Covenant's mission and wants him to succeed, so why would he try and thwart the mission?
Right, so either the Grey Slayer feels empowered, or there's somebody else, effectively.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, I mean, yeah, so they're not going to dance again, she says.
Yeah, I don't think she knows that, though, because we're told that the wraiths were saved by the unfettered one. But yeah, we don't know. We don't know. And then she goes on to talk about the legend of Caeril Wildwood of Garrotting Deep. So some of the unfettered ones go on to study, I guess, under Caeril Wildwood and become forestals. So it's the first time that they've been mentioned in the book. So we don't know anything else about who that is or where Garrotting Deep is or what forestals are. But that's their first mention, so we'll just point that out. And we've got the unfettering hymn, and then, yes, she says, I will not sing it may be that I will not sing any song again. And then up comes the moon, the red moon, the colour of blood, and Drul's laval eyes. It hued the hills with wrongness, gave the night a tinge of crimson like blood sweat, sheening the shrubs and trees, and grass and slopes, as if the whole of Andalane were in torment. So that must be pretty horrific. And there's a scene where it mentioned that Thomas Covenant was regretting having left behind their blankets and gravelling, which is the source of heat. So they're cold, lonely, the blood moon has come up in the sky. It's not a good time.
Yeah, depressed. And she's kind of, this is when Thomas Covenant kind of pushes her along, and he pushes forward. He's getting tired, but somehow the land is sustaining him.
Yeah.
And then, at long last, they see something that at least lifts their spirits a bit, which is the river.
Yeah. The Soulsies. It's a nice name. Blue under the azure sky, it meandered broad, quiet and slow. So it's a nice scene. And then almost immediately they spot a figure on a boat, like a skiff, with a tall figure in the stern. So Atiaran hails the figure, goes running down, and this is where we get to meet our first giant.
Yeah, and his boat is kind of funny because it's moving along and there's no obvious means of propulsion. So, and the other thing that was really cool is how he actually moors his boat.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a I don't know, skateboard or something, right?
Yeah.
So he uses his weight to kind of lift the whole, to dip the front, lift the back, and then kind of flip it up onto the shore, all in a one.
Yeah.
So it seems. How cool.
It is a bit like a skateboard move. Yeah.
And he seems a very friendly giant.
Absolutely. A big friendly giant, yeah. Hail, rock brother, calls Atiaran. The giants of Sea Reach are another name for friendship. Help us. And then she asks his name, and he says something interesting. He says, there is power in names. I do not wish to be invoked by any but friends. That's a nice line. And he introduces himself as a legate, which I had to look up, and in the dictionary it's classed as an archaic term for an ambassador or messenger. And he just happens to be heading to Lord's Keep. So Atiaran invokes his name and then calls on him to complete the quest and take Covenant to Lord's Keep. And she's not going to go with them. So, was that a surprise to you?
Well, I noticed that she was a bit cagey about giving over any info about herself to the giant at first. And I guess because she wanted to ascertain a few things first. And even the giant himself kind of takes a while before he professes friendship.
Yeah. And Atiaran does not give her own name, actually, despite her insistence that the giant give his name.
Right.
She never gives her own name. And later on, when the giant refers to her, he calls her, I can't remember, but he doesn't refer to that woman. Yeah, I think that's how he puts it.
Well, anyway, we'll come to that, but it triggers Thomas Covenant big time.
It does, yeah, it does.
But at this moment, so she says, right, giant, you're going where he needs to go, so you take him, and I'm heading back.
Yeah.
And then Thomas Covenant's kind of like, you know, I don't know, he has this moment where he kind of says, like, don't abandon me, effectively.
Yeah, he says twice, 2 occasions he says, and give up your revenge.
Yeah. And so, do you understand that to mean, as it were, her opportunity to take revenge on him for what he did to her daughter?
Yeah, that's how I read that.
Right, that's exactly it, right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, to that she says she kind of relinquishes it for a higher cause, so to speak. But there's an interesting thing in that. She says, I've kept my vow.
Yeah.
Because I haven't done violence to you. And he challenges that.
He does.
He says, no, you haven't. I says, what do you mean? He says, well, you've done violence to yourself.
Exactly, yeah.
That's a interesting bit.
Yeah, I've underlined that too. And at that point, she's got her knife out. So first time it's been revealed to us that she had a knife, which is similar to Treock's knife, made of stone.
That's right, and she gets it out because Thomas Covenant, he's feeling ashamed, and he tries to encourage her, because the giant is saying, come with us.
Yeah.
And she's kind of distraught. And she's really distraught, more than she's been before. And then Thomas Covenant tries to encourage her and says, don't give up.
Yeah.
And then that's when she kind of, I think, takes the knife out and gets all fired up. Now hear my last word, unbeliever. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
It's another thing I've underlined here where she says, he, the Grey Slayer, has returned. I chose that path because I desired healing for myself. What will happen to the lords if I ask them to help me now? And then he replies, and give up your revenge? Although he doesn't say it out loud, he wondered it. So she's desiring healing for herself. which I suppose is a selfish act, and she relinquishes that. She doesn't want to go to the Lords and ask for help.
Oh yeah, that's what the giant is kind of encouraging her to do, of course.
And then Covenant sees the moral struggle, the triple conflict between her abhorrence of him, her fear for the land, and her dismay at her own weakness. A struggle whose expense exhausted her resources, reduced her to penury. And that's when he says, don't give up. So it's quite a powerful scene. A lot of emotion. But she's made up her mind, she's going. And that's that.
That's that. And so Thomas Covenant sets off with the giant.
Yeah, and we get his name, Salt Heart Foam Follower. What an absolute joyful name. And what a joyful man. I got a real sense of, well, they're on the river, the soul's ease. I got a real sense of my soul being eased as I'm introduced to this new character. Because the way that he interacts with Covenant, he's full of humour and mirth, despite the tale that he goes on to tell.
That's the depth of the giant, right? Because he can take Thomas Covenant's anger and not only not respond with anger, but pacify it and keep this kind of, I don't know, positivity and optimism in spite of the tale he tells.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a real boon to the soul to meet a character like this after chapter of Covenant and Atiaran and all the rest of it. I just feel there's a real lift in the story on this chapter. And he's not condescending in any way. Foam Follower. He takes Covenant's, he sees it as wisdom, some of the things he comes out with, like when he says, I'm hungry. And he's like, good man, of course you're hungry, yes. Why did I not think of that? Right,
and this is at a time when he wants Thomas Covenant to laugh, isn't it?
Yeah, he wants him to laugh after he's told his story about the Unhomed.
Right, because joy is in the listener.
Yeah, joy is in the ears that hear.
That's it. And Thomas Covenant doesn't.
No, he says, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
But the giant laughs. When he finishes his tale of the Unhomed, he has tears coming down his cheeks, but then he laughs and the tears dry. It shows you the power of laughter, which Covenant's clearly not one for practicing.
Yeah, he felt completely unable to.
Yeah, but the giant just has this lightness about him. And he talks of Covenant, he asks him if are you a storyteller? He says, well, actually, yes, I was. Because, he was a novelist. So so Foam Follower's like, well, tell me a story. And the section where he says to him, in 2 words, a story sadder than the first. Say no more. With 1 word, you will make me weep. Because Covenant's just given him really short answers to his questions. How do you live? I live. I just love that scene. And then he talks of he tells the story of how the Unhomed came to be unhomed, which is that the giants lost their home.
Well, just before that, though, there's a interesting bit where Thomas Covenant gets really pissed off with the giant and tries to strike him with the stick.
Oh, yeah.
Threatens to strike him with the stick. And that's when the giant kind of just pacifies him or whatever, but Thomas Covenant's still kind of in the tantrum kind of mood and hits the boat with the stick. Oh, and there's a movement.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's there's a reaction which doesn't last very long and doesn't affect the giant. But yeah, he's kind of jolted a little bit, and so it's after that then that he's giving these one-liners, and and then exactly, and then basically the giant very genially turns it around and says, "Well, okay, I'll tell you about my folk," and then he goes on to do that. So
yeah. I mean, we get the story of the rainbow. So once we get the song of the Unhomed, which is quite a beautiful song, actually.
It is.
And in part of the song, it talks of a rainbow.
It talks about the Creator. So the Creator created this rainbow, which the Creator thought was perfect, but there was a flaw that had been incorporated into it unbeknownst to the Creator.
That's right.
So
yeah.
this was from the metaphor of how the stars came to be.
Yes.
Okay. And which then, of course, is the, as it were, appetizer for the story of the Unhomed. But it was through this hole or flaw in the rainbow that the stars came through, because the whole of creation saw the rainbow. They were so overjoyed. They went there. But then they found this flaw. They didn't know it was a flaw. They went through, and they couldn't get back.
Yeah. In the third verse of the Unhomed song that he sings, it says in the last lines, "We dreamed to dream, we set our sails and smiled at the rainbow of our loss." And then he goes on to ask Covenant if he knows the legend of the wounded rainbow. So we get the story of the Creator. We have had the Creator discussed before. I'm not sure what the details were.
I jumped ahead a little bit. Right, exactly. And I had wanted to ask about that, whether the Creator had been discussed before.
Yeah. Well, the Creator is Lord Foul's enemy, which makes me think of Satan, I guess, as the fallen angel against God, the Creator.
I mean, that's a very obvious one.
Yeah.
What I was wondering was, I mean, maybe at one level,
So it just talks about the eternal universe of the Creator in this chapter. And there he lived with his people and his myriad bright children. So it's the bright children who are the ones who go through the flaw in the rainbow and become stars because they can't find their way back. And thus it was with the Unhomed, who left their homes in boats to explore the land, explore the world, or the earth, they call it, to explore the whole earth. In 20 ships, 2,000 giants said high farewells to their kindred, promising to bring back in stories every face of the multitudinous world, and they launched themselves into their dream. And so it's they who become the Unhomed, and who lose 3 ships in half a generation. 100 giants chose to remain and live out their lot with the Sylvan fairy Elohim. So it's the first mention of the Elohim. And the Vrathair, who were nearly destroyed by the sand gorgons of the great desert. It's quite a tale.
It is quite a tale. So, I mean, there's this almost kind of fantastic, in the sense of like huge, too big to be realizable kind of idea of being able to go and discover everything. And so, they go out and some get shipwrecked, some go off and settle elsewhere, right? And then what happens? They kind of lose their bearings. There are hardships on the way, and tempests drive them beyond their reckoning until hands were stripped to the bone by the flailing ropes, and the waves rose upon them as if in hatred. So, so, I don't know, everything is resisting being discovered, and these poor giants are then kind of washed away beyond any hope of knowing either where they've come from or where they're going to.
Yeah. And so less than 1,000 giants stepped down to the rocky shore of Sea Reach. In disconsolation, they gave up their hope of home. So these are the unhomed who settle in the land at Sea Reach, and these are the giants who become friends with High Lord Damalon, and who construct Revelstone out of the rock.
Oh, I see. These are the guys that construct Revelstone out of the rock.
And they survive the desecration. And Foam Follower talks of how he was born on a ship at the time of Kevin Landwaster's desecration. So they are long-lived, the giants. And they don't have many children, so their numbers are dwindling.
And it also gives a sense of how long they have been in this land, with this yearning to go back. It's 3 times 1,000 years.
Yeah. And they have 3 ships that are always out looking for home, that come back and then get replaced. 3 new standing out when the old return, their hands empty of success. Still we are unhomed, lost in the labyrinth of a foolish dream. And so if he was born at the time of the desecration, that makes him some 4,000 years old. If High Lord Kevin was Lord for 1,000 years, no, perhaps not that long. Yeah, we don't actually know how long has passed between the desecration and where we are now.
Oh, there was one hint, I seem to remember, in the Voyage of the Giants. It said that the children born on board had learned to become sailors, I think, by the time they arrived at the land.
That's right, yeah.
So, but then one must, I guess, know what a giant's lifespan is.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, if it is 4,000 years, then 3,000 years is, I mean, relatively, well, 3/4 of a life. But anyway, I don't know, how can one... Yeah,
we know that High Lord Kevin was Lord for 1,000 years, but when the New Lords were formed, which is the age that we're in now, the age of the New Lords, whatever you want to call it, we don't know whether those Lords have the same lifespan as the old Lords. So it might not be quite that long. But certainly...
Well, you said the desecration happened, so we can pinpoint the desecration, right?
That was at the end of Kevin's reign.
So that would be at least 3,000 years, right? Because Kevin's reign was...
No, Kevin kicked off the desecration at the end of his 1,000-year reign.
And his reign started 4,000 years ago?
Well, I'm going that based on the fact that we've had the history of 4 different High Lords. So the ones that preceded High Lord Kevin was Beric, Damalon, Loric, Kevin, desecration. And we know that Kevin's reign was 1,000 years, so I'm just basically assuming that those other 3 lords also had 1,000 years.
Which would make Mr. Giant around 3,000 years old.
No, because...
Oh, he would have been alive 3,000 years.
He said he was born around the time of the desecration, but we don't know how long has passed between the desecration and now.
I see.
Because we don't know if the new lords have the same lifespan as the old lords. So I presume if the old lords were able to live for 1,000 years, that might be partly down to the 7 wards of lore, because they were lore-wise in ways that the new lords are not.
What's the connection between the lengths of the giants' lives and the lengths of the lords' lives? Is there a connection?
No, I'm just trying to figure out how old Foam Follower is. We don't have enough information to do that.
Right. So anyway, the giants for 3,000 years then, they've been basically on the land yearning to go back home and sending out 3 ships constantly in search of I guess, some way back.
Yeah.
So they still have some kind of hope, but there's this deep sadness then that underlies the giant's kind of jolly nature, huh?
Yeah, there is.
Or at least, maybe if not sadness, at least maybe he's dealt with the sadness, but loss anyway.
Yeah,
and,
sense of
the
loss.
pain of that loss must be felt every so often, like in the telling of the tale, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he can laugh at it. He can laugh just for joy.
Yeah.
Literally for joy. And bring about joy even when maybe, his companion can't do it for him. And, the story is not a joyous one. I mean, yeah, you're right. He's a very likable character.
Indeed, yeah. So this scene here, we've just finished telling the story, and we finish with a song. And then Covenant pushed himself around to look at the giant. Foam Follower's head was held high with wet streaks of gleaming gold orange fire drawn delicately down his cheeks. As Covenant watched, the reflected light took on a reddish shade and began to fade. Softly the giant said, "Laugh, Thomas Covenant. Laugh for me. Joy is in the ears that hear." It's making me tear up, man. It's the first time a giant's ever been accused of being hasty.
Yeah, I chuckled at that.
So Covenant says, "I'm hungry." The giant chucks down his prodigious leather sack, which is full of sustenance, including a drink called Diamond Draft, a vital brew. So he takes a big swig from the jug. It tasted like light whiskey, and he could smell its potency, but it was so smooth that it did not bite or burn. So, Diamond Draft, the refreshing drink. And then there's a nice callback here where we're getting some descriptive writing. And he says, "The twilight turned into crystal darkness in the sky, and the stars came out lornly like scattered children." Before he knew that, he was drowsing. He was asleep. So it's a callback to the children who came through the rainbow and were lost in the land. And as Covenant sleeps, this is where we get the dream within the dream. He's back in his own world. He's lying in front of the police car that we last saw in chapter 1 when he collapsed in front of it. And the policeman's there as he's lying on the ground with his eyes the colour of contempt. "You got in my way, that was wrong, you ought to be ashamed." And then the bystanders around him start to call out as well. The townspeople chorused, "You are dead. Without the community, you can't live. Life is in the community and you have no community. You can't live if no one cares. There is only one good answer to death. Heal him and throw him out."
Yeah, it's a horror of kind of exclusion and being mocked. But, yeah. And again, I mean, I don't know, he thinks he's dreaming, and then this is a dream of what he considers to be reality.
Yes.
Or at least the appearance of the characters from what he considers to be reality, and that sense of the leper being excluded and mocked is totally kind of amplified, and it's almost as if the police car deliberately knocked him down so that the good townspeople could be rid of the leper.
Exactly.
Which they've been trying to anyway by kind of someone paying his bills for him, things like that. So.
Yeah. And then there's that horrible moment where he looks at his hands and he sees that the purple spots were spreading up his forearms.
I mean, the only thing is that sentence, "Take him to the hospital, heal him. There is only one good answer to death, heal him and throw him out." So, yeah, I don't know. That seems kind of strange to be in there, right?
It does, yeah.
Because it's certainly not what the real townspeople would say. And yeah.
So it says that it's spoken by the unctuous voice, which we get earlier on. That once the unctuous voice purred, he doesn't believe us. So I wonder if that could be a benefactor, or could it be Lord Fowl sneaking into reality?
But this voice picks up his thought because he only thinks that. I don't believe this Covenant thought. At once the unctuous voice purred, he doesn't believe it.
Yeah, so it can hear his thoughts.
So, I mean, of course, it could be one of his own internal dialogues.
Yeah.
Voices.
Well spotted. So he sees purple spots going up his forearms. He calls out, "Hellfire, hellfire, hellfire." But then a bubbling tenor voice said kindly, "Do not fear, it is a dream." Then reassurance spread over him like a blanket. And then we leave the dream to end the chapter. He fell out of the stretcher into blackness. So there we have it. Chapter 11, The Unhomed.
Right, so he's kind of comfortable being looked after by a giant and, having some kind of psychotherapeutic process going on in his dreams, maybe as a result of being in connection with the giant, who knows?
Yeah, I do feel an uplifting in the narrative now that we've got this new character. And it's moving along very quickly. I think we got from the celebration of spring and the desecration of that to where we are now very quickly. And the next chapter is titled Revelstone, so we can imagine that we're going to get to Revelstone in the next chapter, which is the Lord's Keep. So the place of Covenant's mission.
Right, and so he's presumably going to get to chat with the Lords and pass on this message, and so, hopefully we'll get a bit of a bigger picture kind of revealing itself, perhaps, in terms of, like, you know, what the hell is going on with Thomas Covenant himself and his back and forths between these different realities and things.
Yeah.
I mean, is it all like one big psychedelic trip where he kind of faces his own kind of big things and then wakes up either, you know, a leper again or cured of it? Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, that's kind of the big question, isn't it? Is the land real? Is it not? Does it matter? What is real? Bigger questions.
I mean, if the experience of it is real, then I think that's why they say that you can't actually, I don't know, there's something about dreaming that, you know, when you're in it, you can't fully establish that you're not there in the dream and in reality. And so
how are you liking it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's good to chat. I mean, it's nice that it's your baby and you lead it along, and you know, I come in with bits and pieces as you know they, I don't know, raise themselves into my awareness and shit like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm getting into it, and I like the giant character, and you know. I see that Thomas Covenant is, he's got a complex kind of basket of goodies that he's got to sort through, and let's see what happens with the land. I mean, there's a lot of I don't know, lore, and there's a lot of like history of this new place, so to speak, and that whole kind of, I don't know, textbook construction of what it is, which is necessary for a new place. But yeah. But then you're there to kind of go with that stuff, and yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be a question at the end of the year on the history of this and that. So yeah.
No, of course not.
Yeah. But I mean, the picture is building. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, am I clocking things that I hadn't clocked before? Probably. I've never read it this closely before. And there's a lot of stuff, like particularly later on, when there are callbacks to what's happening now. And I'll be like, oh, I'd forgotten about that, or I didn't notice that the first time we learnt about it. What I find is that a lot of the info dumps that we get, the way that they're delivered is, it's quite well done with the way that Atiaran tells the story to him, to Covenant, and now we're getting some more of the story from Foam Follower, so it's all done in the form of storytelling within the story, but it's so dense, a lot of the history and stuff, that, there's no way you're going to take it all on board the first time. Nor do you need to get the plot. The plot moves along at its own pace. The info dumps, you can take them or leave them. And it's like anything, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. So you're at an advantage here because you're with me and we're getting a slow read and an in-depth discussion, which I suppose most first-time readers wouldn't have the benefit of.
Well, yeah, I guess that's maybe the key point, because, I mean, if I were to have picked it up just on its own by myself, I probably wouldn't have continued. There have been many aspects that might have kind of put me off.
Interesting, yeah.
Right. And we are doing quite a close read. I mean, a very close read.
Closer than any read I've ever done of anything.
Well, I wonder how many listeners we have then to our close read. Yeah.
I wonder.
Diehards or... well, we'll see.
Well, hopefully some of my old pals will be listening. The folk that I read this with the first time.
Right, and people who might kind of discover TC through our ramblings. How cool.
That would be really something, wouldn't it? So, welcome to you all if you're new to Thomas Covenant and you've stuck with us this far. You have our thanks. I hope you're enjoying it. The reading that we're doing is, there's a read-along that you can join over on the StoryGraph, which I'll put a link to down below. So you can go along there. You'll need to sign up for the StoryGraph, but it's free. You can just set up an account and then you can join the read-along where we're having discussions. Set up little micro forums for each chapter in there. So you can drop your thoughts in there. Let us know how you're enjoying the book, or if you're not enjoying the book, we'd love to hear from you either way. But as I said last week, I don't imagine you're still listening if you're not enjoying the book. Who knows, you might be hate listening. I don't know.
Right, well, yeah, I mean, you'd have to be quite a masochist to be doing that right.
And the show notes for this will go out over at theunbelievers.co, which is where we're publishing this particular show. I think that's all the back-end admin we need to talk about. If you're enjoying it, please drop a review for the podcast. It's really going to help us out to go up the rankings and get in front of other Thomas Covenant lovers. So you can write us a review if you feel like it. That would be much appreciated. And any feedback, I guess the StoryGraph is the best place for that. So find us over there. Join up and leave your comments for us. It's also going out on YouTube, so that's another avenue where you can comment on any feedback you have. That's at Cams Campbell Reads. That's going out on my own BookTube channel as a podcast feed. So search for Cams Campbell Reads over on YouTube and you'll find this, but there's also a link in the show notes. Anything you want to add, Barge, before we finish up?
No, see you in Revelstown next time, folks.
Yeah, see you in Revelstown. Melancurion Abatha.
And not Ravelston Dykes in Edinburgh. Because there's a place.
Oh, is there?
Sounds, yeah, maybe that's why I pronounce it Ravelston, because that's how they pronounce it here, but yeah. What's it, yeah? Ravenstone.
Revelstone.
Revelstone, there we are.
Yeah.
Okay, see you in Revelstone, folks.
See you there.